Tell me a little bit about this cartoon, who it's by, and what the story is here.
Okay, it's by Bob Satterfield, and it's 1912. This is about the suffrage hikes that women took in order to get the vote. Now, the vote wouldn't come to them for another 8 years after this, but there was a group of women who actually walked from Manhattan to Albany in December of 1912 to prove that they were tough enough to be able to vote. And Satterfield did this cartoon to satirize, why do women need to go through all this in order to vote? And he uses a technique similar to Pat Oliphant, which came later. Oliphant uses Punk the Penguin, and this is Sat's Bear, is what he was called. And he has the discourse of the cartoonist in that little frame. It's actually the last thing the artist wants you to see is what the bear says, because that's the artist telling you how he feels.
Now, this one is one of my personal favorites, but you were actually kind of telling me there's something, I don't want to say wrong with it, but why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
Okay. This was actually, there's nothing wrong with this one. It's what came after that's the problem. This is Lincoln Weeping, and it was drawn the same day that Kennedy was shot and killed, back in '63. What happened was Bill Malden was in a diner with some friends when they got the news. And he had already drawn all his cartoons for the whole weekend. And when he got the news, he says, well, I got to go back to the office. I got to draw something. So he got back there, wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He got this idea, and he had a problem in that he kept making Lincoln's hair look like Kennedy's hair. And he actually almost threw this thing away, but he finished it. He finished it in 45 minutes, which was a record for him. He got it to production immediately, and it was on the streets within 3 hours of Kennedy being shot. It was an amazing, production process. They couldn't put it inside the paper because that was all done, so they put it on the back page. You're going to see that a little later on when you see that, that paper that Dr. Mahan kept from the day. The thing that happened is after this one, it seemed like anytime anybody died, there was a weeping Statue of Liberty or a Kennedy or a weeping somebody and they were just waiting. Cartoonists have this little joke about waiting to see who puts the next weeping something when somebody dies instead of doing something more creative. At the time, this was creative. Now, if you see something like this, it's a cliche.
And the idea, though, of as you were pointing out, the cartoonist's voice with words or a statement, the fact that there's no words at all, how powerful is just that idea?
This is what we sometimes call a silent cartoon. There's no movement, there are no words. It's a completely silent cartoon. And it's an extremely powerful way of producing art. And there's no question that people knew exactly what the cartoonist meant when he drew this. The rhetoric in it is tremendous.
It's one thing to see it on a reprint or even an original copy like that, but when you see the newspaper itself in someone's collection, what's that?
It's powerful. It's powerful to see such an icon of history, journalistic history, right here, because I didn't know he had it until I saw it on the pedestal. I said, Charlie, you got this one. He said, yeah, I kept it from when I was a kid. He hadn't told me that he did that. So when we saw this on the 4th, when it opened, it was like, wow, great, great to have it here.
Now, the good thing about the exhibit is that it's equal opportunity bashing of both sides of an issue or both sides, but this one is kind of balanced bashing, if you'd say.
Yep. That's one of the ones the rare ones that is actually not biased, unless it's biased against the whole system. The whole government stinks in this one, and John Q. Public is losing. And in that case, it is biased.
And the other thing about this one that's a little different than some of the other ones is the idea of color in there, and there's a lot of color in there.
It's beautifully drawn. The reds being pink, and of course you got the blues over here at the Democrats. The snakes being odd colors. I notice it's a blue snake biting a pink or red elephant, and it's a purple snake biting a blue donkey, so that there may be some symbolism in that, but there's also coiling around the John Q. Public. And that's interesting because John Q. Public is a cartoonym. There was a cartoonist who created that character, that term. That term, by the way, is in most dictionaries, and it's what I call a cartoonym. I wrote an article for the Mensa Bulletin on the different words that have come into the language from cartoons, and this is one of them. Another one is McCarthyism. Gerrymandering came into the language from a cartoon by Elkanah Tisdale back in the 1800s.
What does that say about the power of cartoons to change the language even?
Or to become a part of the language. Yes, many things are accepted by that. By the way, they were single cartoons in the case of gerrymandering and McCarthyism. It was just a single cartoon, but so many people saw that cartoon, so many people accepted what was in that cartoon and the message that was in that cartoon, that those words became a part of our language and are still a part of our language in the case of gerrymandering after almost 200 years.